That's how you recite the Quran. I know the Quran inside out. English. And if you meet the unbelievers, then smite off their necks. But what part of smite off their necks? The Americans don't understand.
His message before a largely positive crowd of cops and emergency responders at this South Dakota Homeland Security Conference: trust no Muslim, especially those who organize.
Know your enemy. Know your enemy. All Islamist organizations in America should be the #1 enemy. All of them. The Islamist organizations, the Islamic Society of North America should be focused on. You got that on camera? Yes, please.
He is being paid $5,000 plus expenses to speak here with your tax dollars. He was also given a Rapid City police guard during his time in the city. A nice day's work. And judging by his website, where he highlights more than 36 speaking engagements, Shoebat gets a lot of work. Being a terrorism expert has become a cottage industry since 9/11. The Department of Homeland Security has spent nearly $40 million on counterterrorism training just since 2006. DHS doesn't keep records on how much is spent just on speakers. But some of the so-called experts who go around the country teaching, and in some cases preaching, about terrorism and the dangers of Islam are not quite what they seem. People, it turns out, like Waleed Shoebat.
The first thing I want to ask you is, what was the purpose of your talk this morning to these cops and emergency responders here in South Dakota?
Well, being an ex-terrorist myself is to understand the mindset of the terrorist, #1.
An ex-terrorist. It's Waleed Shoebat's claim to fame. A terrorist, a PLO member, who bombed a branch of an Israeli bank in Bethlehem Square, throwing a firebomb on the bank's roof. The problem with the story, with a lot of Shoebat's stories, is CNN could not find any evidence for them. And despite CNN's many requests, neither Shoebat nor his business partner have provided us with any.
Bombings in Bethlehem Square, you specifically said you threw...
The bank was in the Bethlehem Square.
You threw explosives.
Yes, I did.
On top of that bank.
Yes, I did.
No record.
CNN's Jerusalem bureau went to great lengths trying to verify Shoebat's story, finding the general location where the branch of Bank Leumi once stood, but not finding anyone who could remember a bombing. We contacted the bank headquarters in Tel Aviv, asking officials to search records. No records found. And Israeli police found no record anyone ever threw a bomb at the branch of the bank.
Why would the bank not have a record? Why would the Israeli police not have a record?
Why would the Israeli police not have a record? I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you check, what dates, all these things.
There's another part of his story that doesn't check out. Shoebat says he was arrested and spent 2 weeks in an Israeli prison.
There's no record of you being in prison. I think there'd be at least an arrest record. They held you for 2 weeks. Wouldn't the United States know you were in prison if you were a U.S. citizen?
Well, how about me and you go to the Muscovia prison and extract the records? The records are there.
Okay.
Would you be willing to do so?
We did, and the Israeli detention center could find no record of detaining anyone with the name Waleed Shoebat.
Yeah. I mean, you obviously can see why people are critical of your claims. There's a whole lot of gaps in your story.
There's no gaps at all.
We don't have a bank bombing.
Because it turns out Waleed Shoebat, even on his own admission, was never charged.
I was in prison for a few weeks.
What, was there a charge?
No, I was a U.S. citizen, remember? I was born by an American mother. The other conspirators in the act ended up in jail. I ended up being released.
There's another problem, his family. In the neighborhood where Waleed Shoebat grew up, relatives say he was just a regular kid. And Daoud Shoebat, who says he is Waleed's fourth cousin, goes even further.
There were only 2 banks in Bethlehem district, and they are Bank Leumi and Discount Bank. They were on Nativity Square, and Waleed never had any connection with those 2 banks, not a close or a distant connection. I tell you, this is out of experience. I am one of the people who are considered a responsible man in the area of Bethlehem or Bet Sahur. I have never heard anything about Waleed being a mujahid or a terrorist. He claims this for his own personal reasons.
What personal reasons? In part two, we look into the money that Walid Shoebat is making on the speaking tour. He's making quite a bit of it, but even that is shady as to how he's dealing with that money, Randy, and where it is going.
Drew, this is really so disturbing because you think about the connection between the Norway suspect, Breivik, and Wally Shoebat. How much do we know about their connection?
We know from his manifesto, the Norway suspect, that 14 times he cuts and pastes the teachings of Walid Shoebat into this manifesto. He mentions Walid Shoebat 16 times. We have no idea that these two men ever met, ever talked to each other, but we do know that this suspect in Norway was an avid reader of everything that Walid Shoebat was putting out and continues to put out on his website.
Never knowing that he was a fraud.
Absolutely. And the police in South Dakota never knew he was a fraud. Apparently, the churches that ask him to come and speak, the universities that come and speak, nobody has gone back and checked his record to see if any of it is real. And we have found out that none of it is.
Amazing. Amazing story. I look forward to part two. Drew Griffin, good to have you here in studio.